This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Carolyn Rose. You're a nationally recognized author and TEDx speaker. Welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. I appreciate your having me. Thank you.
I want to let people know that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You might see a little icon up there that says Newsly. You use the coupon code of GHOST. You can check it out for 30 days free if you never checked it out. So you get a free listen. It's an audio only version of the podcast, but we are a featured podcast on that platform. So we let people know about it. We also have your link here. So dearrileyrose.com. That'll be fully clickable in the podcast description. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch at the moment. So in the description on those platforms, you'll be able to click through on that. So we like to get that out of the way to let people know about those things. But we always ask everybody who's on the show a couple of questions before you really get into your story. Mm-hmm. So first couple of questions are, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
I think the motivation comes from, I love to write and I love to speak. And I found that it has made a difference for people. And so I'm just continuing to write and speak as long as I can feel that I am adding value to people's lives. And I think it also goes in why I do what I do. I love what I do. I think I'm incredibly lucky to have found something that gives meaning to my life and meaning to other people's lives. I think that's what I've always wanted to be able to do. And so I think that I kind of fallen into this role, and I feel very, very fortunate to be here.
Yeah, I just to let you know, I am a cancer survivor myself. I had a level 3 sarcoma at age 27.
Wow.
I'm at age 57. I just turned, it's my birthday last week on Friday. But yeah, it's just, I understand, and a lot of what I'm doing today in terms of being a podcaster and being a musician, those pieces of my life I wouldn't have done pre-cancer, because I was kind of had a lot of self-limitations. I found that for me, the cancer kind of opened up things once I won. Then I realized, like, well, if I can win that, then why am I scared of this? Why am I scared of that? Why am I scared of this thing?
Right.
And so to kind of give you just an empathetic, like, understanding, like I do understand somewhat where you're coming from.
Yeah. And it really is sort of a unique perspective, but I do think when you have experienced it, you really do understand. I mean, my life was on such a different path before I was diagnosed. And if I look back where I was then and where I am now, it could not be further apart.
Yeah, it's a hard thing, because one of the topics we want to get into is like the difficult conversations, recommendations on, things to say and what to do and what not to say and do when a loved one's in need of support.
Yep.
And I don't know, like, from what happened to me when I was 27 is because I'm around a bunch of people in their mid-20s. Some of my friends could not handle that I had a cancer, and they just disappeared.
Yep.
And other friends really leaned into it and helped me. And I was really surprised which people actually disappeared and which people stuck around.
Yes. It's funny. I was 27 when I was diagnosed as well. And I would have said the exact same words. I was so surprised at some people's reactions. I mean, some people I would have bet money they would have been right there with me every step of the way. I never heard from them, and vice versa. People I didn't feel as close to showed up in big and small ways. And it's really eye-opening. And I think I carried a lot of resentment, unfortunately, for a while towards the people that I felt didn't show up. And I think it's taken me this long to sort of understand, we were in our 20s, and had the situation been reversed, I can't say that I would have been there for them. I was still in my selfish, invincible 20s bubble. And I don't know how I would have reacted. And I think in retrospect, I think they were just scared. I think they were scared for me. And I also think they were scared for themselves, because I was one of the healthiest people, out of our group of friends. I was a marathon runner. I ate well. I was quote unquote incredibly healthy, other than this, stage 4 aggressive cancer that was raging through my body.
It kicks you in the can. And like, what happens is, like, I think like young people think they're invincible. A lot of times they don't have life insurance policies. They don't
Mhm.
think about that. They don't want to think about it.
Sure.
They don't go to the doctor as often as they should because they think they don't need to.
Uh-huh.
That's not me. That's not happening to me. Happens to
Right.
somebody in their circle.
Yep.
Then that mortality question gets like right up front,
Yeah.
and then either you deal with it or you don't.
Right.
And
Right.
I think I just like I just kind of I don't know. I'm a Buddhist, so I kind of it's like okay, that's not their path.
Right.
And maybe their path will come back to me one day, but that's not their path. So I was like, what? I'll let it go. But
Yeah.
because I was kind of in this mindset that helped me get through,
Yeah.
because I was thinking about like the law of attraction, I'm thinking about, well, things are supposed to happen.
Yep.
Why did this happen? Right.
Yeah.
From Buddhist perspective, it's like, okay, this path was supposed to happen.
Right.
So what am I going to learn from it? Why did it happen? And can I take advantage of it?
Exactly.
And it's a
Exactly.
different hard to do that because you could get in the dumps and say, "Oh, like why did it happen to me?" And like, I
Yes.
know this is like this. So I don't
Yes.
know if you can talk about your process and how you went through
Yeah.
like your diagnosis and like what happened and like how it hit
Hmm.
you. Maybe tell that story.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you just said is so true. And especially, I think it's so amazing. You and I were the same age when we were diagnosed, because when you're in your 20s, you really are in that, I mean, I went to high school, I went to college, I had a game plan. I was very type A, I was going to be a surgeon and that was going to be my life. And
Mhm.
then you have this, you know, shocking diagnosis happen and it completely takes you out of that life. And I didn't want to be taken out of that life. I fought it. Had I been older when I was diagnosed, maybe I would have been a little bit more receptive to it. But at that time, yeah, I mean, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to keep running marathons. Um, I was actually training to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And when I went in they wanted to do blood work before we did the vaccinations that you need before you go to
Mhm.
Africa. And that blood work had red flags on it. So I had to go back and repeat it. And then I think 2 hours later, I was in a hematologist office. And 24 hours later, I was in surgery having a lymph node removed. And sure enough, it was this crazy, very rare form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
It was already at stage 4 right from the start.
I was at stage 4 from the start. Yeah.
Wow.
And I say it all the time, but I mean, I was truly in the best shape of my life. I was ready to go climb this mountain. I had just run the Boston Marathon and, my fastest marathon time. And so it was shocking on so many levels.
So you weren't feeling any kind of symptoms. You weren't feeling anything that would have kicked it off other than the blood test.
I never had one symptom, not one. In retrospect, I think because I was a big runner, I had the endurance, but I didn't have the strength to climb this mountain. So I'd started working out with weights. And in retrospect, I remember looking in the mirror and I thought, wow, I'm seeing these results very quickly. I remember my neck was a little thicker and I'd put on deodorant and I'd feel what I thought was a muscle, but it was actually these were all lymph nodes,
Well,
but I
those
didn't
were
know.
you weren't. Yeah, that's hard.
But
Cause
yeah,
like if you don't know what to look for,
you don't know.
like, I was like saved for the fact that I had a level 3 sarcoma and it was
Mm,
on my back and it wasn't internal, it was external. So
mhm,
people said, "What's this lump on your back?"
mhm.
So then I was because I was able to see it,
Yeah.
I was able to go in and they boom, they like, "Oh, this is a level
Mhm,
3 sarcoma." I mean, at first they thought it was a
mhm,
cyst and then but like I imagine like if you have cancers that aren't readily apparent,
mhm.
right, that's a lot harder and they could go like undiagnosed for, get to
Long
a level
time.
4, get to a higher level because you
Yeah.
don't know.
You don't
They
know.
yeah.
You don't know. And I mean, even still today, I look at myself or my kids or my husband or my dogs or my friends, and if they have an ache or a pain, I do tend to go,
Hypersensitive.
yeah, I go to the red zone, it's sort of, okay, we're going to the doctor. You don't know. And so that's sort of one of those traumas that I have of just when your life changes on a dime and you had no warning. In retrospect, I mean, everyone kept asking, did you have night sweats? Did you lose weight? Did you? No, I didn't have anything. So
Yeah,
that
that
was
can
pretty jarring.
that can really get you, like, you just were able to, at least have the blood test
Mhm.
to know and have doctors that go, boom, I got to jump on this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, even when they found out, in my case, like, boom, I'm right in surgery. I'm in a second surgery, like
Mhm.
really quick. You go from
Yeah.
like, boom, and it's like, what the heck happened? Because
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of my career.
Sure.
My other part of my career is I'm a software designer, and I was with this
Mm.
big software company, and I was
Mhm.
traveling, and I was a road warrior, and I happened to come back from like Minnesota. I'd been there for like 7 months,
Mhm.
and yeah, I started noticing that thing on my back, but I was on
Mm.
the road.
Mhm.
But it wasn't really that big at first, and then it grew very fast.
Was it painful?
It didn't really feel like anything,
Mhm.
but people started saying I was looking a little white,
Mm.
that I was looking pale, that was my eyes were kinda getting bloodshot, so I was actually showing stuff, and I was starting to feel, and I'm a mountain biker, and I was
Mhm.
riding with my buddies, and it was like I wasn't able to hit the hills as fast as and my recovery was slower,
Mm.
and I was like, "Something's going on," so I go to the
Mm.
doctor. I
Mhm.
said, "Hey," 'cause I was starting to feel it. It's like I had, like,
Mhm.
symptoms. I could see it, I could feel it. Things
Yeah.
didn't feel right. I was starting to get some night sweats. So, yeah, I mean, it's like I actually, you know, I probably should have gone quicker than I did, but I mean, I went as quick as I could.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and even if deep down you knew, you don't wanna admit it. You don't wanna know. You know when you go to the doctor, there's no more ignoring it. It's real.
Yeah,
So,
that's the hard thing.
I understand that wanting to push it out a little bit.
Yeah, it's like you feel like these low moments, like I had the first surgery and then I had to go for another surgery within like a week, and I
Mm.
hadn't even recovered from the first one.
Mhm.
And then like the first one kind of kicked my,
Yeah.
and then the second one is like, oh, then I was like really, I
Really
felt like,
down.
wow, is this what my life's gonna be now? Like all
Sure.
these surgeries and
Why did
not
they
being
do them so closely together?
because the first surgery when they did it, they thought it was a cyst.
Mm.
And then the second surgery, they did the biopsy and they realized it was a cancer.
I see.
So they did a wider area and then
Yeah.
immediately went into as soon as I could healed up, they put me
Mm.
on a maximum radiation dose, that
Yes.
lifetime dose. I
Oh
got
my
the max radiation you could get. I can't go outside with my shirt off.
oh my gosh.
I have to make sure I wear hat. There's like I can't get a lot of X-rays from the dentist because I got
Yeah.
my max like radiation. So there's certain
Wow.
things like that even to this day still affect my life, but don't think about it too heavy. It's just when you go to doctor, you have a
Sure.
max radiation dose. You have to be careful how
Sure.
many people use X-rays on you and stuff like that. But
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just you have to start to realize, change your diet,
Mhm.
change your like you're already exercising. I was a mountain biker, so
Mhm.
what you know, I wasn't a smoker, I
Yeah.
wasn't a drinker.
Right.
So I was like, where did this come from?
Right. 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 Well,
For
that's
you, like
because you
you're an
kinda wanna
athlete,
know why. You wanna
yeah.
understand.
Did you have like a history? Like, was it
No,
family history or just out of nowhere? Just it
nothing.
wasn't nothing.
Nothing. People kept asking me, they said, I did my treatment at MD Anderson, and people that I would meet or patients or doctors, they all said, "Well, did you grow up on a farm?" And for the
Mm,
longest time, I thought that was the oddest question, but then I realized they were talking about the
pesticides, yeah,
pesticides that are
yeah.
sprayed, and that was a big, people could point to that, um, for the type of cancer that I had, and I thought back and no, I was not on did not grow up on a farm, but, I
Well, did you have a
then
well water? Like, did your house have, like, public
no,
water or well water?
public,
Yeah.
public.
Uh,
I mean, and, I don't know in chi who knows, but I will say, because I did have very young kids at the time, I did become pretty obsessive about, trying my best to eliminate chemicals from the
yeah,
home.
I
Like,
think I wrote an article on VOCs,
yes, I
volatile
mean,
organic compounds,
yes,
and I started
yes.
to actually find instances all around me
Wow.
where, like, I found this chemical company in Connecticut where I lived that had
Mm,
actually polluted a pond.
wow.
Because they were, like, located in the '50s, and then suddenly the company went away, and then suddenly put a car dealership there near this pond, but
Mhm,
in the 1950s, from the '40s to the '50s, they were dumping VOCs and solvents into the pond, and the
mhm.
pond was a swimming hole, and then
Oh,
there was a really high instance of cancer in that area, in that town,
yeah.
and then they come to find out there's this known EPA kind of Superfund site, but nobody really seemed to know about it because they didn't want to publicize it because all these houses around the pond, they wanted to sell the house. They wanted to be able to keep their value,
Yep.
but they didn't care about like, well, that pond is like a source of
Yeah.
cancer. You know?
Yeah.
It's
Oh
like,
my gosh, that just makes me sick to think about. I
yeah,
just,
stuff
because
like that.
you know, we don't know. I mean, when you don't know, you don't know. And I think a lot of things we don't know, and we're not given the information.
Yeah, it's just interesting, like how many I started to become very aware
Mhm.
of like where these things could be.
Yeah.
You go
Yeah.
and say like there's a garbage incineration plant
Mm,
putting PCBs and all kinds of bad things into the air,
into the air. Yeah.
and then it's getting into the source of the water supply for the town.
Yeah.
They're
Gosh. I
burning the
mean,
garbage, and it's like, well, you guys don't put things together.
yeah. Yeah.
It's like
It's
there's all these
wild.
inputs are all over the place, and then
Yeah.
people don't want to deal with it because
Right.
they don't want to think about it.
It's
But then,
easier
like,
not to think
when
about it or know.
if you're a cancer survivor, you say, "Well, I kind of want to talk about it."
Well, we've lost the luxury of being able to turn our heads away from this. You know, we now kind of have a responsibility to ourselves and our people to learn about it. And I think we're pretty hardcore organic eaters. No plastic. It just doesn't happen. We're pretty strict about the water we drink, things like that. I did recently start using the microwave again, but very rarely.
Yeah, my daughter got crazy, and she went and got like all these really advanced water filtration systems.
Yeah.
There are beyond birders that actually
Yes.
take out microplastics,
Yeah.
and they take out like reverse osmosis
Yes.
stuff,
Yes.
like even on the shower head.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
so it's like people don't think like that. But if you're a cancer survivor, like maybe want to get obsessive.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
like we have a hydroponic garden and it's using reverse osmosis before the water goes into the garden.
Oh my goodness.
Do that to be able to control whether or not we're getting a lot of pesticides on our lettuce and a lot of our spices and a lot of
Yeah.
all our greens that we homegrown.
Yeah.
So we know that they don't have
All this
all
stuff.
the pesticide that's out there in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have your own garden out there.
Yeah.
That's
We have
fantastic.
hydroponic. Like we found a way to indoor hydroponic tons of like veggies. We got veggies grown all over the house in these hydroponic
Wow.
gardens. With
Do you
these
enjoy
pumps.
that?
Yeah, I think it's cool, but I'm a techie. So my daughter's
I'm learning
my
you have a lot
daughter,
of layers. This is fascinating.
my daughter is techie too. So she's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do this, Dad. I'm
Yeah.
doing this for everybody in the
Yeah.
house." So she's 25 and she's doing a lot. She's a graphic artist and she has her own problems. She has like some disabilities, but
Yeah.
she works remotely from home and she's like working for artists that have disabilities. She does virtual galleries for artists, and she's like an art director that runs these virtual galleries for disabled artists all over the country.
That's amazing.
But she's doing the art.
Yeah.
Got it from her pop and grandpop. But you also got the tech head. So yeah,
I feel like you're
but
very left brain and right brain. I feel like you're in touch with both sides.
try to do that. I think it's a balance.
Yeah.
It's like Renaissance person.
Yeah.
Like if you get like the Da Vinci kind of idea, like you can be in engineering and art at the same time. But,
Yeah. Who would have thought?
Yeah, it's kind of a thing in the liberal arts,
Yeah.
because people are so specialized.
Uh-huh.
I have I think I wanted to have a very broad based education, so it was just pure liberal arts.
Yeah.
But I think it's just like when you get into like the heaviness of the thing with cancer, though, when you come out of it, you see like opportunities, right? So the opportunity to educate, because you were doing all these TED talks, and I do podcasts. You're a TEDx speaker. Like, what made you want to do that to kind of spread the information around to this?
Yeah, I think that I was diagnosed in 2004, so it's been 20 years that I've been a cancer patient, and I think it has taken me almost this long to really be able to look back and appreciate it, and have gratitude for the journey I've been on, and take from it the lessons I've learned. And I think that for me, it's not so black and white as, you hear that term, live like you're dying, a lot. And I agree with that. But then it's also kind of in my mind like this romantic idea, right? Like, let's go live every day like it's our last. But
Yeah.
what about savings and retirement savings and bill? Like, we still have responsibilities, and we're
Yeah, you
still,
still have the
you
left, right
know,
brain. You got to come in. You
yeah,
can't just be an artist and say, "I'm just going to live
yeah,
like a pure artist." It's like, well,
yeah. I mean, we
that might
can't
not
just
work
move
out.
to Italy and, it's not idealistic. So I think that for me, it's really been interesting, this concept of, we've been given this second chance at life. And really, we all have, I mean, we've all gone through struggle, we've all come out of it or are still in it. And how do we kind of marry the two ideas of being realistic yet taking the lessons we've learned? And I think it really is sort of back to that simple idea of just finding joy in the moment. It's, we
Yeah,
don't have to move to Italy to paint. We could do it right here. I think that it is such an incredibly powerful lesson, and one that I try to teach my kids every day, of just finding joy in the here and now, because you can do it anywhere, anytime. um, and I also think the second part to your question is, I think it is this idea of hope that's really complex. I don't have this idealistic idea of hope. I think hope is essential. I really do. But I also think hope does not guarantee a happy ending, right? I mean,
yeah.
when I was inpatient going through both my bone marrow transplants, I met many patients that didn't make it. And they
Mhm.
were incredibly hopeful. Their families are incredibly hopeful. And I think that was so powerful for me to see the families, especially that we became close to, because you're there for 2 months at a time. Um, what they then did after they lost the loved one, they started foundations, or they, donated to their loved ones. Like, it was almost like hope shifted form and kind of went in a new direction. It was never lost, and that to
Yeah,
me was just the most life changing uh, lesson to witness, how they handled it. And I think I was told I could never have kids. I was told my cancer would never be cured. And, 20 years later, I have two healthy kids, and I've been cancer free for 14 years. And I feel incredibly lucky to have that story. And I know not everybody does, but I think if you hear of one person that did it, it gives people hope. It's like, well, she was told she could never have kids and she had two. So maybe I can too. Because we can't lose that hope. You can't not try.
I think that, yeah. What I looked at is, the fact that I survived it. I said, well, I gotta like give something back. I gotta do
Mhm,
something,
mhm,
and and so I started, or I gotta like change my mindset.
mhm,
So my mindset, I actually went I lived in Tokyo for 2 years with
mm,
my wife and my daughter, and it's something I would have never done.
mhm,
And I started to do my music, and I, instead of being in the background, I went to the front, and I started doing a podcast. And I wasn't the
mhm,
kind of person, like, I was super shy,
mhm.
and I've done over 1,000 podcasts. It's like I'm not
Wow.
the guy that would be doing what I'm doing right now.
Mhm,
I'm not that guy
mhm,
at all. And
mhm,
well, now I am, but it's like, but I looked at, and I try to show people, it's like what you feel is like your wall, your glass ceiling, like your limit.
mhm,
Once you go through something, I deal with people who go through addiction and get out of it, or go through bad relations, get out of it. Work with
mhm,
trauma therapists. A lot of life coaches deal with people who are in these bad places, whether it's like
mhm,
physically from an illness, or mentally from, it's the same level.
mhm,
Some cases, because you can not be here from the same type of affliction. The
mhm,
mental afflictions can take you out like cancer.
mhm.
You can be gone,
Yeah,
because and so, like, when you find a way to process things, and it's like an artist.
yeah.
Like, what I deal with artists, we take our art, and it's like catharsis. It's
Mm,
a way we can process it, and then bring that moment to the world, and then people can feel the beauty in what maybe was painful, or
mhm,
melancholy, or
mhm.
joyful, but
Yeah,
you go through it, and you find a way to kinda, through art therapy,
yeah,
bring
yeah,
something to the world, and not
yeah.
just be in yourself. And I
Right.
think that's what you're doing with your TEDx, and to bringing it out there, is the
Mhm,
same idea. like you're
Mhm.
to the world, right?
Yeah. And I always say, like, I think we all have a struggle or many struggles. Mine was cancer, yours was cancer. We've had many others along the way, but I sort of say fill in your blank, right? Like some people have financial issues or depression or going through a divorce or lost a loved one. Like we all have it. And it's not so much the circumstances, but it's that connection in the struggle that I have found is so incredibly healing. And when we're able to really honestly and authentically talk about it and admit where we are in life, in my experience, those were the most beautiful conversations and powerful changes have happened. And I don't know if um, that's talked about enough and celebrated enough. There's no shame around it. We all have it, but we just got to
Yeah.
talk about it, right? We got to get
Well, it
into
ends
it.
up being like it's a deeper conversation than some people are willing to have. Like, 'cause some
Yeah.
people just want to talk about the weather and talk
Hmm.
about sports, talk about like what happened, and then it's like
Hmm.
you go into these conversations. It's like
Hmm.
like people have mental health issues. Like people might
Yeah.
not want to talk about that. People
Right.
have personal relationships, issues with their spouses, with relationship issues that might be
Hmm.
really heavy.
Totally.
People
Yeah.
might not want to talk about it. Like cancer gets into the same kind of lanes. Like
It
some
does.
people feel very uncomfortable. But if you find it's like the whole thing with the law of attraction that
Hmm.
you can put stuff out in the universe and some people won't like it and some
Hmm.
people get drawn to it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do
Yep.
it.
Yep.
So it's like once you realize like, oh, I have a permission structure to
Hmm.
actually talk about this. And maybe
Hmm.
this person or these people won't want to be around, but
Yes.
these other people do want to be around. So did you
And those are
find
your people.
yeah,
Yeah.
you found your tribe, you went to the people that understand what you're talking about.
Were you nervous at first to put your music out?
Yeah, because I mean, I music was something I was doing since I was like 12 years old,
Hmm.
and I never really put it anywhere.
Hmm.
And really, like after the cancer, I like opened a SoundCloud account and I
Hmm.
started pushing it out. And then I started, thinking about like how would I ever perform this stuff? How would I
Hmm.
actually take it? And I started, getting into bands when I was in my, teens and but we were always in the basement. We played a couple parties, but we never pushed it.
Hmm.
I ended up like by the time I got into my 30s, I actually went and played in New York. I played in Boston. I did, shows. I created this show. I've done like bedroom producer festivals with emerging artists and started interviewing artists
Yeah.
and then pushing my brand. And I'm releasing singles and albums even to this day. And
Hmm.
it's not something I would have done
Hmm.
until I realized the cancer kind of gave me the permission. It's like,
Sure.
what's hard about that?
Yeah.
I you cancer. So what's so hard about putting the song out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just put it out and see
Yeah.
who likes it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is the only life we get, right? It's not
Yeah,
a
you
dress
might as well
rehearsal.
try
We
it.
got to do it.
Yeah, you gotta try it. Like if we put so many restrictions on ourselves about like
Hmm.
a lot of times it's always gotta be perfect.
Yes.
The
Yes.
perfection trap. I talk about that all the time, and I'm a big purveyor of the happy accident.
Hmm.
Like just be real and do it. And sometimes like the thing that's like not rehearsed kind of in the moment ends up being like I roll the tape all the time when
Yeah.
I'm in my studio because I don't know
You don't know.
if it's gonna be I always I talk to a lot of authors. It's like, yeah, I'm always got the
Hmm.
voice recorder on. I'm always got the note. I've always
Hmm.
writing on pads and the back of
Hmm.
menus. Like, a lot of artists I've talked to, it's like,
Hmm.
I got to put it down.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
you got to get it. You got to get it out of here. Get it
Yes.
out of here.
You have to get it out. And I think for me, that's what writing became. And it's funny because I was never a writer, and it became this almost like I would sit down and write, and I don't know where it came from. It was almost like a spiritual experience.
Or
It
the
just,
muse. It's like what
yeah,
the
and it
Victorians
it
called the
was
muse.
it was like I dumped it, and then I was exhausted afterwards, and in the book it was just published. Like I felt like every chapter I wrote was like a birth of something, and I had
You
to just take
channeled
a
it.
while after, and it really was. And the same thing. I mean, I'll write notes now in my iPhone. This thing. I think you start to look at the world through a little bit of a different lens when you are looking at it through a creative lens, whether it's music or writing or art or whatever, like, oh, that would be so cool to paint, or that would be so cool to play or to write, or that thought, like, how can I take that and go with it? And that has been such a gift for me, and terrifying at the same time, but a gift to be able to kind of say, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And if it resonates, great. If not, that's okay. I remember I went to a back to school night. This was years ago when my daughter was in second grade, and her teacher was kind of giving her thing. And I'll never forget, she said, I live by the rule of fives. And I always tell my kids, when they come to me and they're upset, I say, is this going to be a big deal in 5 minutes? And sometimes they say yes. And then I say, all right, is this going to be a big deal in 5 hours? And usually they say, no, not really. And then if it still is, then is it 5 days? Is it going to be a big deal in 5 weeks? And, you really do kind of extrapolate it out. And you think this really isn't that big of a deal, and most things in life are like that. And when you can sort of talk yourself through it, it does give you the I don't know, courage or ability to kind of, okay, I am going to do that, or that doesn't matter that much.
Well, you got a power to kind of like the Victorians always talk about, like the looking glass self. You look at the mirror and you start doing some self-analysis, and like the 5 things is kind of like that. It's like you just don't go through life without doing an assessment. Yeah. And the looking glass is like that lesson learned. It's like, what did we do good today? What did we not do good today? Where am I really at? Like really having those conversations, and it's hard. Yeah. Some people don't want to actually, they have a lot of noise, and they can't find clarity. They can't start finding like root cause, like, why am I triggered? Why did I get mad?
Right.
When it really wasn't that big, it was like a 5-second thing, and I blew it out of proportion. It's like, why do I do that? Like, did you dive into it, or did you behind it? There's other things behind it, or do you actually look at like why in your life you do things? And I think when you start to write or be creative, you start to look at those things. You start to paint like the foundation of what you're gonna be.
That's very well said. Do you ever worry about your cancer coming back?
Yeah, I've worried about it. I mean, I do 5-year scans. I've got a dermatologist that's always looking. Almost every year. Now that I'm in my 50s, they say, well, we probably need to do that like every year. And, but it's never come back. But they've kind of told me that, the radiation potentially, it could come back in my 70s.
Yeah.
Because the radiation gave me like my life back.
Yeah.
But there's a cost when you get to your older, that you could actually come back. So you get the time from 27 to 70, but you might, so they were real clear about what was going on, about the options.
Sure.
So you take the options and say, well, I want to be here now.
Yes.
Till then. So I'll pick that.
Yes. And it is like a real wrestle with intense fear, realistic fear, with kind of trying to be super present and in the moment. And I find those very hard to balance sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it was heavy when you're 27, somebody's telling you you're going to cut your life down.
Yeah.
But then you might not have a life if you don't do it.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, we got a couple of choices here.
Yeah. Right.
So I had to pick some. I even had something where they told me I could do this advanced chemo, where there's a 50-50 shot that was placebo. I said, well, if it's a 50-50 shot, it's placebo. So you're telling me if I do it, you're not actually even curing it. And I went and made the decision, no, I'm going to go with the max radiation therapy instead of this thing, because there's a 50% shot that they're not even doing anything, and this is level 3, and it could go to level 4. So why would they do that? Right. It seemed like we're in some experimentation thing that doesn't really add value for me. And I think you have to start, we age 27, I had to make a choice. And I think I made the right choice, but it's kind of weighty. It's like I didn't have a lot of people to talk to in my family that understood what those choices were. I was educated, so I kind of did research.
Yeah.
But it would have been cool if I had more people around to actually ask questions. And I don't know if you ran into, like, did you have enough information about the things that were happening? Or if the things were going so quick, you had to make decisions pretty quick.
So fast. And I think that's the hardest part, is because you're at your most vulnerable state really. And sometimes I find there's too much information. That's why I say never Google it. You get the bad stuff when you Google. And then there's also, um, you know, there is access to information, but I remember just feeling so vulnerable that I think I made the very conscious decision to just, I loved my doctor and I just said, I trust you and whatever you recommend, I'm going to do it and I'm never going to look back. I am going to, if this works, great. If it doesn't, I will not look back and say, gosh, I wish I'd done that or I wish I'd done that, because you can drive yourself crazy with,
Oh yeah, with the
right?
options.
Like it just, it's never it's not a perfect decision. They're going to be pluses and minuses, and I think we just have to do it and just kind of move forward. And I remember I saw, it's kind of a long story, but there was a psychic that I saw. I think it was right after my first bone marrow transplant, and I think I was 30 at the time. And I remember he looked at my hand and he said, "Oh dear, you're going to die when you're 40."
Oh,
And I
great.
looked at him and I thought, really?
Really?
Yay. Oh, I'm going to make it to 40. This is
Oh,
good.
so you looked at it a different way.
There was not the response he was wanting. And I'm
Yeah,
47. So obviously it didn't happen. But, I
yeah,
just remember and my husband was with me and he was so surprised at my reaction. But I remember feeling that, it's like, oh my God, thank God I'm going to make it. I'm going to be okay. So,
yeah. You never
yeah.
know how you're gonna take something because you're coming from a different place. Like
Yeah.
being a cancer, like getting to that age, if you're in your 20s, like that sounds great.
Yes.
Given some diagnoses, is like people might not get that, but
Right.
like some people might only have 2 years, 3 months, 6 months, one
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And so if you're told something that goes out 10 years, 15 years, then there's like, wow.
Yeah.
And it's hard to think about your mortality. I think that's what we were talking about at the beginning.
Yeah.
That's what makes people uncomfortable
Yes.
because
It
like
does.
like nobody likes to think about like, oh, I have an expiration date. Like you kind of know every human being does.
Hmm.
You don't want to have it happen before you think it should happen.
No. And I think I've definitely become, for some reason, more terrified of death. I think I might have gotten slightly comfortable with the idea in the middle of all the treatments, but
Hmm.
I think the more space I have from it, I notice, I see, a dead squirrel on the road. And I mean, I have like a reaction to it. It's
Uh,
not, and
yeah.
it's just an interesting thing I've noticed about myself that I really react to it, just anything, any concept of it. Um, and I don't think I used to be that way. So I think that's something I'll have to dig into
Well,
at
it's kind
some
of like
point.
how you process trauma. Like you had
Mhm.
personal trauma of going through something really heavy, like cancer.
Sure.
It's a heavy personal physical event in your life,
Mhm.
and how
Mhm.
you gonna deal with it physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually.
Yes.
Everybody deals with it different, and if you
Yes.
can people try to create like some kind of plans. Like everybody's so different, you have no idea. Right?
Mhm.
You kinda have to look at each person and understand, like, oh, what were the triggers that this person had? What's the
Mhm.
experience? What's the emotional stability they have? What's
Yeah.
their spiritual outlook? Like, there's a lot of factors,
Right.
and everybody's so different, they're gonna perceive things different, and then people want like, "Oh, you're like, "Yeah, well, not everybody has the same, response
Mhm.
to this situation, to
Right.
with these particular stimulus or thing triggers or things that happen. You see the
Mhm.
squirrel, somebody says, "Oh, it's just roadkill."
Yep.
Doesn't really think about it in a
Yep.
deep way. And if I'm a Buddhist, we think all life has like power and energy and is important. So we
Mhm.
are sad about it because like
Mhm.
there's, you know, but that person probably transfer, that animal transferred to a different state. So
Mhm.
we can be happy about it too.
Sure.
So it means you
Sure.
got to a higher state. So it's like your immediate impression is like, "Oh, I'm sad," but I could
Mhm.
be happy that it actually maybe you got to the next level.
Mhm.
The next
Mhm.
second, I'm like, "Oh, he's at the next level, and he's in the
Yeah.
next."
And I think that what you said is so, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning with just the people around you when you're going through, what we went through, cancer and stuff. They may not react the way you wanted, but they are looking at it through their own lens and perspective and set of life experiences that we can't possibly understand. And so that's where I think with age, it's much easier for me to have understanding and empathy towards that. I think
Mm-hmm.
when we're younger, and especially going through it, that really we take it, the way of we're hurt, we're angry, and the resentment can build.
So on a TEDx talk, like, do you did the physical talk in front of an
Mhm.
audience?
I did. I did.
So yeah, that's I'm gonna try to kind of compare the parallel. Like if you're a musician and you're in front of that audience,
Hmm.
like you have this kind of two-way communication.
Hmm.
And you kind of
Hmm.
read the room as you're doing the TED talk. And had you really done a lot of public speaking? Had you ever done
Hmm.
like been a musician or been an actor doing stage plays? Was that the first experience you had on stage, or something you had already been doing?
So I've been speaking for a while. I started speaking with City of Hope out of Los Angeles. I lived in Los Angeles for about 16 years and did follow-up treatments out there. And I remember they called me and they said, "Hey, there's a dinner of some, I don't think it was prospective donors, and they wanted me to speak." So I went to this dinner, 30 people. I was nervous as could be. And I did it and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And I loved the conversations afterwards and hearing their stories, or their loved one was going through something. And then they called me a week later and they said, "We need your help. There's a big fundraising event tonight in Santa Monica. It's the music industry's Spirit of Life Award. And our speaker is sick. Can you speak?" And I said, "Okay, this sounds big. How many people are in attendance?" And they said 3 to 5,000. And I said, "Oh my gosh." And so there were some of the top music industry people in that, well, many of the top music industry people in that room. And I shared a stage with some incredible musicians. And that was my second time speaking. So that really threw me in the deep end. And I loved it. I loved everything about it. And so then they used me more and more. And they've taken me all over the country. And I'm now speaking with MD Anderson as well. And I think the TED Talk was such a beautiful yet challenging experience. That'll test you. I'm so glad I did it. I would recommend it to anybody, but it is much more structured and high pressure. And you kind of walk out and you go right into it. There's no audience interaction at all. And I'm not used to that.
Oh,
I'm
that must
used
be
to
hard.
kind of,
So
yeah. And
there's no
so,
two-way. There's not a lot of back
mhm,
and forth. You're just
no,
presenting without any kind of
yeah,
interaction, other
yeah.
than maybe reactions from what you say immediately. Maybe.
Exactly. Exactly. And so it was great, and I'm so glad that it's I love to interact with the audience. I like to see them, I like to hear them, I like to talk to them afterwards.
Oh, and it doesn't have that. You have to. You're just
Mhm.
done. You do
No.
that, and then you're not. There's no talking to them
You go
after.
back to the green room, and then, afterwards, if you wanna hang out and see people, but by that point, everyone's
Energy's kind of dissipated.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, kind
So,
of like if
yeah.
you're a musician and you're doing a small club
Uh-huh.
versus doing a big festival.
Yes,
Like, a lot of times,
thinking.
if you're in the small clubs, like, you go to the, the merch table, you talk
Yeah.
to people, people get the crowds right there, you can see them, you can touch them, you see people's faces. If
Mhm.
you're at the festival, you can unless you see that first row, you don't
Mhm.
really see anybody, and then you're like, so many acts are there, you don't really get to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
You go back to wherever your staged area is, and maybe you can sneak back into the crowd and try to hide and act
Mhm.
like you weren't there.
Yeah.
As you do that, you go back, sneak into the crowd, and you try to act like you're not one of
Yes.
the guys, the fan.
I went and sat in the back row trying to listen to the other people.
Yeah,
I
that's
think I
you
should
can do
change
that.
clothes.
Yeah, you can do that. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. 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 No, I think that's a great comparison. I think that was exactly the feeling. Yeah, it's wonderful and fabulous, just a little bit more disconnected by
Mhm.
design.
Yeah. So, like, so when you got into this public speaking, you really felt like this is where you need to be. Like, you
I
felt
did.
like
Yeah.
it became so is that something that surprised you?
It
Or did you
shocked me.
kind of feel that that was a path that maybe you hadn't really dived into?
So I think my answer now would be, I think this was my path. I think I didn't have a clue that this was my path.
Mm.
I really believe I'm doing what I was supposed to do in this lifetime. I just never would have guessed it, and when it kind of came knocking, I didn't resist it, but I did it very skeptically and kind of tiptoed into it. And I think that it became clear fairly quickly. Just again, it was really talking with the audience afterwards that gave me that. Um, it's not that they praised me. It's that it gave them space to say, "Thank you for telling your story. This is what I'm going through," and it gave them that time to really, open up and to someone that they knew would understand. Because I also find sometimes, at least when I went through cancer, it's lonely because, you could have a huge family and a million friends around you, but you're going through it,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and they could be by your side the whole time, that they're not going through it. And
yeah,
they're going through their own thing, right? Like, and I can't understand what they went through. And I think to be able to talk to somebody who really is in that place, there is this connection that you just have it instantly. And I'm so honored that people do open up to me. And I think that they keep, the resounding messages, "You gave us hope. You gave us hope." There was a man I think I was in Georgia, and he came up after and he said, he was just crying. And he said, "I've got a nephew who went through a bone marrow transplant, was in remission for 2 years. His cancer just came back. He was told he had to have another transplant. And we have been distraught because we've been hopeless. But I just heard you, and you went through 2 transplants, and look at you now." And he said, "I'm getting ready to call my nephew and give him hope because you just gave me hope." And I'll never forget that. And I just thought, that's why I'm doing
that's
it. That's it.
that's the importance
That's
of,
it.
like, they're doing that. The whole effort of connecting with people and kind of being like, I was like a teacher. It's like a sensei. You take your lessons learned in life and you learn that you could be somebody that can actually, you know, that actually help other
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
instead of like being part of the problem, be part
Yeah.
of the solution. The
Yeah.
idea is like, instead of just agonizing, you go and do something. Like, if I tell this story, it's going to resonate
Yeah.
and it's going to help people who might be in a really bad place.
Yeah.
So if you can give that kind of energy, you can tell that story.
Mhm.
That's, why we do the podcast is like, we've been doing this to have people tell their stories.
Yeah.
And everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different experience. But the more stories you can bring to people, then
Mhm.
people can see, hey, I feel that way, or I
Mhm.
feel like that way. I know somebody that feels that way. So I'm
Yeah.
not as alone. Like you said,
Yeah.
because being alone on the planet with all these people, like all these people being alone, is like, it's like we got to get people connected.
Yeah. Yeah. We do, and give everyone, um, you know, kind of permission, and take away that almost that shame of feeling alone.
Yeah,
I think, or at least for me, for a while, I thought, "What's wrong with me? Why do I feel alone if I've got people around, surrounding me?" And like, I remember the first time that they told me I went into remission. I'll never forget. I was on that exam table, and I think I had my parents and my husband in the room. And the doctor came in with the results and said, "You're in remission. This is the best day ever." And they were crying and high fiving and hugging. And I just remember sitting on that exam table, and I remember feeling like the loneliest person in the world, because I was happy, but I was also terrified, because that meant I was in remission, right? Like, I knew life as a cancer patient. I knew every 3 weeks I went in, they'd give me a warm blanket, they'd poke me here, they'd do this. And there was some safety in that. There was
yeah,
routine. I was fighting it, I was actively fighting it. You go into remission and it's like, so you're not going to be giving me medicine, and I'm not get warm blankets, and you want me to
yeah.
just go live my life?
You kind
What
of
is
like,
that,
well,
And
yeah, you should be happy with that. But if you've been like comforted by the process,
mhm,
by the treatment, and then
yeah,
suddenly you say, hey, now you don't need it.
right.
Psychologically, you could have been leaning on it.
Yes.
And then if it suddenly just goes away, it's kind of like, withdrawal from that
Literally.
yeah, and it's hard, and it's kind of like, well, why wouldn't you be happy? But it's like you said, it's like people would not understand what you're saying until you speak the words you just said.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that's why you need to,
Yeah.
speak and write
Yes, I
and
agree.
get people to see, because there's a lot of people who probably felt exactly what you just said
Hmm.
and never knew how to articulate it or tell anybody about it
Right.
because they felt, bad about it.
Right.
Or there's people like with diseases, a lot of people feel shame about it.
Hmm.
They feel
Yeah.
like, oh, well, there's something, or I did something wrong, so this has been put on me. So that instead of like, you know, yeah, and that's the kind of where your head's at. Like if you've
Yeah.
been taught that, well, your consequences are because of your actions, then suddenly you think it got brought upon you, and then
Exactly.
and even nobody says it, then you still could feel it.
Right.
And so it's a hard, and the world isn't really that accommodating to people that have disabilities or people have diseases.
No, it's not.
People don't always care.
Right.
It's like, oh,
Right.
maybe you need to wear a mask around this person because this person's got a reduced immune system, and it's like, well,
Mhm.
I don't want to do that. It's like, well, okay, but
Right.
you don't care about if you give this person the flu at this point, you could kill them, right? So
Literally.
yeah, people like they were so concerned about themselves
Hmm. Hmm.
that they just like, well, that's my right. It's like it's your right to do that.
Right.
So I was like,
Right.
okay, that's where your head's at. But like try to get people to understand. It's like it's not all about you. Yeah,
Correct.
it's like even when I'm talking about the candidate. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I just think that you just have to be relatable, and
I
I think
agree.
some people put themselves into zones where can't relate.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I agree. And I think that I've found power telling my story, and I've also found that we all have such a powerful story, even when we don't think we do. And I think owning it is just it's takes a lot of courage, but it's very freeing when you're able to just own it as it is, and then you
Yeah,
find that people really are a lot more loving and accepting than at least I anticipated.
there's a lot of power in owning your story, right?
Hmm.
And not letting somebody else write it.
That's
Like
right.
you let if you a lot of people don't take charge of their life. They let other people, or they let their kind of vision of what
Hmm.
they think they should be,
Hmm.
rather than look in the looking glass and being who they're actualizing who they should be.
Right. I agree.
And it's like that's what I think when you go through trauma, no matter what it is,
Hmm.
you can get informed and actually start to, have that conversation with yourself first, and then
Yeah.
put yourself in that space where suddenly now, like now you can be on that stage, you can write the book
Yeah.
because you're in that place where like I'm going to teach lessons, I'm going to, bring it forward, pass it on.
Hmm.
I'm not just going to keep it to myself and then agonize
Exactly.
in my room and look at the window and say, well, I could be out there, but I'm sick, so I can't be out there. It's
Right.
like, no, you could still be.
Yeah. And I also, I think too, it was what gave me a lot of courage to do it was that I did lose. There were so many people that were on this journey with me in the hospital that didn't make it.
Mhm.
And I really had the thought of
Doing it for them.
it's like a way of honoring them. It's a
Mhm.
way of, you know, showing and explaining, like I was given the opposite outcome. I was given life. I don't want to waste it, right? Like this was a gift that was
Like an
given to
obligation.
me.
You
And I
feel
do
like
have a little
you're
survivor's guilt, it's sort of, but it is what it is. So then how do I never want that to be for nothing, right? And so I don't want to waste this gift. I don't want
yeah.
to not try and do something good with it. And um, whatever it is, raising awareness, giving hope, there's so much you can do. But I think honestly, having these conversations is, in my opinion, the most powerful thing.
Well, it's an obligation to humanity. Like if you can
Yes.
pass on knowledge, is like why there's these oral histories that take, over time people have done this type of passing of knowledge. It's why I love, the podcast platform because it's like having people tell their oral history stories.
Mhm.
and passing it on, no matter who they are, where they are, anybody in the world, any
Mhm.
situation they've gone through, then people start to see that we're not so different.
Mhm.
That we have commonalities and parallels, no matter what religion, what sex, whatever.
Mhm.
That we can start to see there's common ground in humanity
Mhm.
and the empathy that's necessary because the
Mhm.
empathy seems to be lacking in the
Completely.
current state, like the U.S. right now.
Mhm.
It's like everybody's in a camp. They
Mhm.
got this and like that, and black and white, no
Yeah.
gray, and it's like when you can talk to somebody who's a survivor,
Yeah.
like domestic abuse survivor, you know, crime survivor, you know,
Mhm.
a medical situation survivor, and they tell the story, and then people can sit back and it's like, wait a minute,
Mhm.
what am I getting mad about? Is that really a 5 minute thing, 5 second thing, or is like not a thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and come out of our corners enough to not be so like we're so scared we stay in our corners, right? Because we
Hmm.
kind of that's where we feel safe. And but if we can kind of come out of those black and white corners, it all happens in the gray, right? Like
It
that's where
glaze over
life
when
happens. That's where the connection and coming together and not being so afraid to listen to someone else's point of view and feel like we could actually hear them because we don't have to be right. We can allow ourselves to leave room for another opinion and at least consider it or just hear it, but
yeah.
not be so um, violently clashing because I think that's kind of where our country is at the moment,
I
unfortunately.
like to blend, like as a painter, you blend colors to get new colors. As an
Mhm,
artist, we blend sounds to get new sounds. We blend genres to get new genres.
mhm,
And some people might, I'm only going to be a blues guy.
mm,
But what if I mix progressive rock and hip hop and country and clap in
mhm,
the same space? What
mm,
if I take different things and try to? And it comes from like not being afraid
mhm.
to actually have something that somebody who says I don't like it.
Yeah,
Wait, I don't like what you said. It's like, well,
right.
I'm still going to say this, and the listening skills,
Mhm,
right, to actually process what somebody says,
mhm,
and let there be a little bit of silence before you go on and make a response. Did you actually listen?
mhm.
Did you actually hear it?
Hear it. Right.
And sometimes we need to pause so
Mhm,
that people, like when you give a speech, like have you learned about, like I've talked to some people about the pause, like you say
mhm.
something very profound,
Powerful.
but you don't step on your own message by
Yeah,
immediately going to the next profound thing. You let it kind of resonate
yeah.
so somebody can actually understand what you just said.
Yes. 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 The most powerful thing I think in speaking is that pause. The intentional pause.
We have to do that in music today. We kind of have people that just like the whole song is the hook.
Mhm,
Sometimes we need to not just have the hook there. We
mhm,
need something to be a little quiet or
mhm.
space so that
Yeah,
you can get to the next hook or the next
yeah,
part of the song. But if you the whole thing's hook, then it becomes kind of like meaningless. It becomes too
yeah,
much. Like you get overloaded and then it just becomes like noise.
yeah, yeah.
And that's, I think what's cool when you're a public speaker, I think you understand what I'm saying
Mhm,
is like I'm putting it in musical terms, but I think you could probably feel
mhm.
that the concept that I just said.
100%, 100%. Yeah, we kinda have to set it up with little storytelling, personal, and then you kinda build up to it can't be, the whole heavy message the whole time, or it's not
Yeah.
doesn't carry that impact and that weight.
You have to have the build up like a great piece of like Beethoven or Bach. There's build ups
Mhm.
and
Yep.
there's like quiet spaces, like day crescendos. There's like things happen, and then there's like little moments of calm, and then it comes in. It's like so. Then the actually when you come in, if there was quiet before you came in, it has more of an effect.
Yes.
So it's just like when you say something profound, you got to leave the space for that profound notion to be heard.
Mhm. Completely agree.
But
Yeah.
I want to thank you for being on the show. It always happens, we always go by an hour faster than we ever imagined.
It's flew by.
But
It's
this
great.
happens. But I want to thank you for being a guest on the Family Like the Ghost podcast. Now, if people click on your link, what happens when people click there?
It'll take you to my website, and I think on the homepage you'll see the book I just published, and you can get other information. My TED Talk's on there. A lot of information. Contact, reach out anytime. I always love speaking with anybody.
I want to let everybody know, like, we've been on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. That link is going to be fully active in the description of the podcast. By tomorrow, we're going to be all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon. So be on the lookout. If you don't use the platforms I just mentioned, we will be on all the major platforms by tomorrow. Again, thank you for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast.
Thank you all for having me. Appreciate it.